Good day, church. We are excited about the possibility of being able to gather together after so many months next week on May 31st. We want to be able to ensure a clean environment and a safe environment, and if we can do so, we are going to gather on May 31st around the communion table. We also want to encourage you, if it's not the right time for you yet, do not feel bad. You can join us online and be part of the church that way. Come when you are comfortable and ready. Have you ever felt like there was obstacles in your path that you could not overcome? I'll never get past this physical limitation. God could never use my story. I'm not strong enough, smart enough. I'm too old, or I'm too poor. Truth is, every single one of us has an obstacle that we feel that we cannot overcome. But in the eyes of God, our greatest obstacles become our greatest opportunities to let God shine bright. A few years ago, a German marketing company put out one of the best commercials I had ever seen. And it was completely ignored by Adidas, even though it was designed with them in mind. Take a look at this. I love Old Testament stories, and I love kind of getting deep into these books and finding these strange, obscure stories, because you really see God shine in these awkward and weird situations. We're going to be asking the question today, how do we break free from the obstacles that are holding every single one of us back? How do I accomplish what God has set before me when it feels like everything about me is so limited? We're going to be in 2 Kings Chapter 6, picking up in verse 24. Afterward, Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, mustered his entire army and went up and besieged Samaria. And there was a great famine in Samaria, as they besieged it, until a donkey's head was sold for 80 shekels of silver, and the fourth part of a cab of dove's dung for 5 shekels of silver. Now as the king of Israel was passing by on the wall, a woman cried out to him, saying, "Help my lord, O king." And he said, "If the Lord will not help you, how shall I help you? From the threshing floor or from the winepress?" And the king asked her, "What is your trouble?" She answered, "This woman said to me, 'Give your son that we may eat him today, and we will eat my son tomorrow.' So we boiled my son and ate him. And on the next day I said to her, 'Give your son that we may eat him.' But she had hidden her son." When the king heard the words of the woman, he tore his clothes. Now he was passing by on the wall, and the people looked, and behold, he had sackcloth beneath his body. So God's people had this history of a lack of faithfulness, and they would find these patterns where they would say, "God, we want you to protect us, but at the same time, we're going to start following other gods." and we're going to live our lives the way that we want to live them. And they would quickly find themselves outside of the protection of God. And at this point in their history, that's exactly the pattern that they're in. They have completely turned their back on God, and now they are wondering where God is in moments like this. The people of Samaria, they're living in this great, big, walled city that felt like it was so safe. And soon they found that they were under siege by the king of Syria. Now, sieges are an incredibly effective tactic of war. If your army can surround a city, it can prevent any trade from coming in or out, or any goods or any food from coming in or out of the city. Then you leave the city that is under siege with just a few options. They can decide that they're going to leave the safety of their walls and attack this army that has superior ground. They can surrender, or they can starve to death. The Samaritans had chosen the third option. At this point, a donkey's head was selling for 80 shekels of silver. If you're wondering about your lunch or your dinner decisions, this is not the most delicious part of the animal. Dove droppings were selling for 5 shekels of silver. 5 shekels of silver in the ancient world around this period of time would have been about a month's wage for a regular laborer. Essentially, only the incredibly wealthy were surviving off of the absolute worst edible scraps that existed inside this city. So they've been under siege for a while. Things have been hard. They're losing hope very, very quickly. And if their diet of donkey head and dove droppings disturbed the king of Israel, it got a lot darker quick when a mother approaches the king to settle a dispute between another mother. Verse 26 has this mother crying out for help. She wants someone to hear her sorrow. They are suffering physically, mentally, and spiritually. I think the story of this mother is so incredibly shocking, and it doesn't just show the depths of her hunger, it shows the depths of her sin and sadness. Maybe your circumstances don't reflect the story at all, but there's a lot of folks here right now that feel that there's obstacles before them that are too high, too deep, and hope is just a pipe dream. Robin Williams was quoted before he passed. All it takes is a beautiful fake smile to hide an injured soul, and they will never notice how broken you really are. Do you know anyone in your life with this type of pain and sorrow? Are there people in your life that have been crying out for help from the obstacles that feel like they're absolutely insurmountable? I've had the pleasure of getting to know one of my wife's former students that was from Guatemala. Pablo comes from a big family in a small village in Guatemala. He began attending school, and he had dreams of taking over his dad's farm, which grew all kinds of delicious fruits and things that were needed inside their town. His dreams were destroyed, though, when his father was horribly injured in a farming accident. And with one accident, it changed the entire course of Pablo's life. Immediately, he was forced to drop out of school because someone had to put food on the table. By the age of 11, Pablo was driving great big trucks as his friends were on their way to school and getting their education and hopefully pursuing their dreams. After that job fell through driving trucks, he began working on camionetas, which are big, elaborate buses that transport people around Guatemala. Pablo, at the age of 12, hung off the sides of these camionetas, loading luggage for the passengers. And the most he was ever able to earn when he was in Guatemala was $4. Pablo described his life as sin esperanza, meaning without hope. Never earning enough money to feed his family, never having an opportunity at an education or a future. He looked at his life, and the only thing Pablo saw was obstacles. And so he set off for America. As a young teenager, he said goodbye to the only people he'd ever known, not knowing if he would ever see them again. You see, the world is full of beauty and pain. But the good news is that there's a God that is bigger than the hurt and the pain that we bear. 2 Kings chapter 7, picking up in verse 3. Now there were 4 men who were lepers at the entrance of the gate, and they said to one another, "Why are we sitting here until we die? If we say, 'Let us enter the city,' the famine is in the city, and we shall die there. And if we sit here, we die also. So now come, let us go over to the camp of the Syrians. If they spare our lives, we shall live. And if they kill us, we shall but die." So they arose at twilight to go to the camp of the Syrians. But when they came to the edge of the camp of the Syrians, behold, there was no one there. For the Lord had made the army of the Syrians hear the sound of chariots and of horses, the sound of a great army, so that they said to one another, "Behold, the king of Israel has hired against us the king of the Hittites and the king of Egypt to come against us." So they fled away in the twilight, and they abandoned their tents, their horses, and their donkeys, leaving the camp as it was, and they fled for their lives. And when these lepers came to the edge of the camp, they went into a tent and ate and drank, and they carried off silver and gold and clothing, and they went and hid them. Then they came back and entered another tent and carried off things from it and went and hid them. So we have these 4 guys that are sitting outside of the city, and it's important we remember the state that they are in. They're not inside the city where everyone's eating donkey heads and dove poop. They're not on the side of the conquering army who is surrounding this city. They're right in the middle of where the action could potentially be. Things are not looking very good for these 4 gentlemen. No one would ever approach these people. They were outcasts. No one cared about them. They felt like they deserved every bad thing that was happening to them. And finally, they get to this point of absolute hopelessness. If we go inside the city, we will die. If we go out to the army that is surrounding us, we are going to die. So let's give this army a shot. Let's do something. Let's have momentum going in one direction, because inevitably staying here, we are definitely going to die. So they enter this army camp, and it's completely abandoned by the people that were there. They find silver, gold, horses, you name it. More riches than they could ever imagine were at their fingertips. I believe that the most hopeless people in a hopeless story were the ones that find the greatest redemption. Pablo came to Chattanooga feeling hopeless, afraid, and alone. But I believe that God has a soft spot for the hopeless and the brokenhearted. Quickly, Pablo connected with a church downtown. He went to school during the day, and he worked on a construction crew at night. This was difficult, and he didn't get a lot of sleep, but Pablo put his nose down in one direction and just worked as hard as he could to achieve his dreams. His skill grew, and he began his own construction company. Eventually, Pablo found a life that he never expected. But since gaining his citizenship, Pablo gets to drive down those same roads that were once filled with hopelessness in his very own car, and he gets to spend 3 months out of the year at home. I imagine that as he's traveling down these roads, he remembers all of these obstacles that seemed insurmountable, and the roads that just seemed so bleak and so sad. No education, no family, and no hope. But God is bigger than the obstacles that we face. Every single one of us should see ourselves as the lepers in that story, because every single one of us has a disease. And I know that you probably are wondering right now, I'm pretty sure I don't have leprosy, but every single one of us has this disease called sin. Our sin separates us from a life of goodness, a life of joy, a life of love and meaning. But just like those lepers, some of us have stumbled upon a great mass of riches. And all of a sudden, our lives have become blessed beyond understanding. And now we have a choice. Do we share this good news that we've been given, or do we keep it to ourselves? Imagine what life was like for the lepers for a moment. They have lived a long time as outcasts, and now they have absolutely everything that they could ever imagine and dream of right at their fingertips. What do they do with it? 2 Kings chapter 7, verse 9. Then they said to one another, "We are not doing right. This day is a day of good news. If we are silent and wait until the morning light, punishment will overtake us. Now therefore come, let us go and tell the king's household." I love this part of the story because you have these men that are surrounded by more wealth, more food, horses. I'm sure that tastes better than goat heads than they've ever had their entire life. And I wish I could say I relate with the heart that they have. But they say, we have so much good stuff. God has obviously blessed us and given it to us when we were at our absolute most hopeless. We've got to share this. We can't hoard this and keep this all to ourselves. They remember the people back in the city that had always turned their backs on them. They remember that they're starving. They remember that they're scared that at any moment this army was going to crash down onto them. With their blessings, they remember their brothers. And just like the lepers, every single one of us has good news in Jesus Christ because every single one of us was saved when we deserved to die. The punishment that we deserved was death. Rather, God blessed us with his son Jesus taking our sins on his back to the cross. So the question that I have for you today is, with this good news that you have, who are you going to share it with? Are you going to hoard this fact that Jesus died for you? Or are you going to tell someone and share the riches with them? Church, let's worship.
My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly trust in Jesus' name. Christ alone, cornerstone, weak made strong in the Savior's love. Through the storm, he is Lord, Lord of all. When darkness seems to hide his face, I rest on his unchanging grace. In every high and stormy gale, my anchor holds within the veil. Christ alone, cornerstone, weak made strong in the Savior's love. Through the storm, he is Lord, Lord of all.
Church, it's been an honor worshiping with you. And I hope that if you take anything away from what we've talked about today, it's this. There's going to be obstacles in every single one of our paths. At times, it's going to feel like there's nothing we can do, that all of these obstacles are going to weigh us down and we're never going to achieve what God has called us to. But the fact is this: Jesus came and overcame every single obstacle that was in our path. And because of Jesus, we have hope. If you are in a position in life right now where hope just feels like it's a million miles away, where Jesus sounds like a mythical fairy tale, and you need someone to speak with you or connect with you, we want to encourage you to respond down below. Also, maybe good things are going on in life. Maybe God's blessed you in some way. We would love to hear how God's working in your life. So follow the link below, respond, let us know what's going on in your life. If you'd like an opportunity to worship through giving, that link is also below. Church, have a great week. Share the riches of what you've been blessed with someone else.